Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm Tony Haggerty and I'm joined today by Alison McConnell. And we're just going to dive straight into it, Alison. A day of hectic transfer activity for Celtic with 3 coming in and 2 going out. The 3 coming in, Jota, Georgios Giakoumakis, who were more or less expected, but a late night deal for Catman and Carter Vickers from Tottenham, a defender, and Odsonne-Edouard going to Crystal Palace and Ryan Christie going to Bournemouth. Did you kind of feel that was the way it was going to pan out, or do you think Celtic were going to bring in more or lose more? You frozen there, Alison? Oh.
Hi, I don't know what happened there. My apologies.
It's all right. I forgot Lee Griffiths also as well out on loan to Dundee, so that was 3 in and 3 out. So
yeah, I think there was an inevitability about some of it. I think there were a few surprises too. I think Lee Griffiths had looked imminent in terms of his departure. He's really not featured much at all. And given the last indiscretion, I think it was inevitable that there would be a parting of the ways. And I think we would say the same for Odsonne-Edouard too. I think there was a tiny bit of intrigue maybe with Ryan Christie's situation, but again, I think the vast majority would have anticipated that coming. The Cameron Carter Vickers move was a very late one last night to bring in an extra centre half, and I think that would be a welcome move given that Julian is still a little bit away.
Yeah, I think the Jota deal and the Giakoumakis deal were more or less expected, weren't they? Because they'd been linked with those players throughout the window and for the past few days. But Celtic supporters, I think some of them were saying it's a good window, others are saying it's a bad, not as much a bad window, but they wanted more like cover at left back and things like that. But I think all in all, it's been a decent window for Celtic.
Well, what you would have to say on initial impressions is that it's been a busy window. I think, 11 players come in, 12 players come in. It's certainly been productive in that sense. I think when you judge it is over the next few months, when you come in and see what the impact these players make, what their contribution is in terms of first team football. But I don't think you could criticise the club for sitting in their hands. There's been an activity in the window, and you're never going to get everything that you want in one window. I think you maybe need 2 or 3 to build the team that you want. I would agree. I think left back remains a position for Celtic. I would still say there's a need too for a creative midfielder in there. And I think these are definitely things to think about going into the January window. And I also think it again raises maybe question marks just about the infrastructure of the club and who we know is maybe has the final responsibility for those kind of roles, for the identification of players and the securing of transfers. But certainly it's been busy. I think Odsonne-Edouard moving on was much anticipated, and I think sometimes when the window closes, it's an opportunity then to know what you have and to go and work with it. And there's a period of stability in that sense for the next few months.
Also on reflection, Alison, the 2 players that have left in terms of Odsonne-Edouard and Ryan Christie, they'd kind of made their feelings known that they maybe didn't want to be part of Andy's revolution moving forward. So that's also probably a good thing for Celtic, that those players have now gone, and he has a squad of players that now want to be there and will give their all for the club. And I'm not saying they didn't try and didn't give their all for the club, but I think if they were agitating for a move, then it was best to have a parting of the ways in that sense.
Of course, to be fair, I'm not sure how much agitation went on. I think had things gone another way on Sunday, Odsonne-Edouard would have been signing off with a goal at Ibrox, and possibly Ryan Christie too, when you think of the incident with Kyogo. But I think if you want to go and test yourself at a higher level, I think if you want to go and play in a different league, and I think both of those players had ambitions to go and do that. I think it's in everyone's best interests that you take the opportunity when it comes along. I don't think it would have made much sense for Celtic to allow Odsonne-Edouard to run down his contract, unless you knew you were getting a fully focused player for a final season, in which case there might have been an argument to keep him, given the fact that it could have given you access straight into a potential Champions League spot if Celtic were to go and win the league. You could argue about the merits of having kept him then, but I think last season there were certainly question marks over his body language and his temperament and whether or not he wanted to be there, some of which I have to say I think were maybe unfair at times, but listen, he's moved on. I think you close the door now and thank people for what they offered to the club, and you get on with what you've got in terms of a squad to work with now.
I think also as well that the money that Celtic recouped, the best part of 21 million with add-ons and Eddie's deal for Edouard and Christie is decent return financially, which they can now possibly reinvest moving forward in January. But looking at the players coming in, Georgios Giakoumakis, the Venlo striker from the Eredivisie, top scorer last season with 26 goals. He'll certainly add something. If you look at his highlights reel, there's some decent headers in there, and it looks like a powerful presence that maybe Celtic have lacked up front for a wee while.
I think it's another option. I think there was still an argument to say that they could have gone with one more striker. I think you've actually lost two strikers in the window with Griffiths going. I'm not sure that Albin Ajeti is going to feature too prominently under Ange Postecoglou, so I think there could have been an argument for another striker coming in. But I think what the addition does is give Celtic maybe the potential to play slightly differently too, maybe just to tweak the system at times. And another winger coming in as well. I think James Forrest has had a few injury issues over the last year or so. I think it provides some cover there. I would reiterate, I still think a creative midfielder, I think for me, would be Celtic's biggest priority at the minute.
And also as well, Jota coming in, you mentioned him there. He can play out wide, and that's cover there for James Forrest. He's obviously targeting certain areas where he still feels he needs cover, Alison. But the Cameron Carter-Vickers took everybody by surprise. It was very late. I think Celtic wanted to do a deal in terms of a loan deal. Spurs initially said no, they wanted to sell him. And I think they came back very late, like 11 o'clock, half 11 last night, and it was all done and dusted very quickly. But that's a position that Celtic fans were desperate to see strengthened, so they'll be happy with that.
Yeah, I think there's been a need for some defensive reinforcements. I think you've seen it over the window, and I suppose that when you factor into the manager's thinking that if he loses a player through injury too, he was very, very light. I still think there's not a huge amount of depth within the squad. I think it still looks light in certain areas, but I think defensive cover would have been seen as a priority. And I think with Christopher Julian coming back too, I think over the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, then you'll have options there. There'll be personnel options, and I think when you consider the games that Celtic play over the course of a campaign, when you're stretching to 50 or 60 games, I think you need that cover.
I think the bench at Ibrox set alarm bells going, didn't it? In terms of game changers on the bench, they didn't really have many. Rogic came on and Celtic created a couple of chances, but it was that lack of depth in the squad that was highlighted on Sunday, wasn't it? When the bench was announced, I think the supporters wanted to see maybe more. There was talk of maybe the likes of Alan McCann, who's now gone to Preston for just over £1 million, or £1 million, and I think some Celtic supporters were disappointed that Celtic didn't try for him. But do you think the manager maybe happy just now, and then he'll take it to January and see where they are, and then they'll go again and maybe bring in a few from, the J-League, things like that?
I'm not sure where he might be sourcing. Again, it comes back to a question of infrastructure and just who has the responsibility for sourcing players, identifying players, scouting players. I think the manager probably has enough in terms of day-to-day duties. I think that's maybe the next question now that the window has settled and players have come in. The next window might just be around the internal workings of the club and these key areas and key roles and what's happening in terms of the long-term picture and building up a kind of infrastructure that facilitates the clear running of the club, because I think the January window is arguably an incredibly important window. I think it's very difficult. I think when you speak to managers, they'll tell you it's a very difficult window to bring players in and bolster your squad. But for clubs like Celtic, I think that's when you really have an eye on the summer and potential European qualifiers. Now, this summer might be an aberration. I think there's the likelihood is that whoever wins the title will go straight in to the Champions League, which is huge. But in terms of the long-term picture, I'm not sure how sustainable that be with the fluctuations that take place in the coefficient. So I think the January window can be very, very important in terms of your preparation for those very early qualifying games that come in the summer, coming in July.
I was going to say that it could be a massive window, the January window for Ange and Celtic, because as you say, the qualification could rest on, the winners of the league getting straight into the Champions League and getting that £40 million or access to £40 million. So you've always touched on that you think that teams should build for those qualifiers from January onwards, and that's maybe in Ange's thinking as well. And possible that you're talking about someone identifying players. Would Celtic now be looking to recruit a director of football or somebody for that role?
I'm not sure if it would be
recruit players.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it will be a director of football now. I could be wrong. I know it was certainly a consideration some months back before the manager arrived, but I think a clear head of recruitment when you have someone whose key responsibilities are in sourcing players. And I think it's a while since you could point to a successful conveyor belt of talent coming in and out of the club. Now I'll qualify that by saying that they've just cashed in their chips here, and it's been a fairly lucrative window. But I think for a while Celtic had a reputation of unearthing players, like when you go back to Victor Wanyama and Fraser Foster and Gary Hooper, and Odsonne Edouard would fall into that category too. And I think it gets harder and harder to find players within the current structures, and I think it's a key role for any club to go and have the responsibility of finding players that fit within the parameters of the club, fit within the financial constraints, and suit a particular business plan. And I think Celtic have a very clear business plan. I think it has been clear for way more than a decade of what they wish to do, but I certainly think that that's a key role that is up for discussion. But the other point about the window and the January window, I think managers do tend to need 2 to 3 windows just to get a clear idea of the squad that they want and to really put their imprint on their own team.
I was going to say this could be seen as valuable time for Ange now, the international break, where he will have a chance to work with the players. He's got this squad, this is a squad now to January, and he's got some time now to work with them, albeit there'll be some players away on international duty, but you can get down to doing some serious work. The season has come at them pretty hectic and fast. There's a wee bit of time now to just say, right, okay, assess where they are, and also get them motivated for what lies ahead.
I think it's been a very intense start. I think he came in knowing that there was a substantial body of work to do within the squad in terms of overhauling the squad, assessing the squad, deciding what he wanted to bring in during the window. I'm sure the transfer window would have been seen as a pressing priority, given the early dates with which it closed. I'm sure that would have been his first job, really, to go in and trying to decide what he wanted to do in the window. I think now he might have an opportunity to draw breath and just take a step back and assess his opening months in the job and decide what comes next. Obviously, there's now Europa League games to be played and the domestic campaign to think about too. I think it might just give him an opportunity to just assess things and to have a look at where they are and where they've been over a short period of time. And I think he'll still wish to look for improvements. I think there's still been a bit of inconsistency with Celtic. I think we've seen it over the last week, and I suppose it will be about coming back and hitting the ground running, really. I think it's Ross County's the first game when they come back after the break. I think it will just be about getting a result, bringing a bit of stability back, and then just trying to build on the early foundations.
I've written on the Celtic way before that Ange's now a man at work and Celtic are a work in progress. It's been a mixed bag. They've had 2 great wins at home domestically, 2 losses domestically, but they've also got themselves into the Europa League group stages by beating a very good Dutch Eredivisie side. So when you weigh it up, they're probably ahead of progress and schedule at the minute, Alison. And obviously the loss to Rangers was a dunt, but there may be a few dunts along the way, but they are building something, and it's we might see a while before it comes to fruition, but the early signs are positive.
What you would have to say is that there is an optimism about the squad that wasn't there. I think there's a sense of people wishing the manager to succeed. I think there's an element of everyone being on board with what he wishes to do, and I'm not sure you can underestimate how important that is. I think when you don't have that, it becomes very, very difficult to turn the tide and arrest that kind of opinion. I think you're almost up against it if you don't have it. The fact he's got that is very, very important. But what I would say is that at either Celtic or Rangers for any manager, you need to be winning games. I'm not sure there's much tolerance for bumps in the road. Let's put it that way. I think any honeymoon period now will be coming to a close. I think Europa League will have been regarded as a fair enough return. I'm not sure, given Celtic's recent track record, that Champions League football on a regular basis is an attainable objective. I think where Celtic are at the minute is very much a Europa League level, but domestically the demands will be very, very different. I think people want to see a certain kind of football, but more importantly, they want to see certain results.
Do you think now that we remove the work in progress label from Ange then, and as you say, they now have to get down to the serious of business of getting to work and winning games and stringing a run together? You see, because that's domestically, that's demanded, isn't it, of Celtic?
I think that's inevitable. I think for any Celtic manager, it's inevitable. I think everyone would know that there was a lot of work to be done, but I'm not sure how much patience there would be really to see how long it takes. I think people do want an immediate impact. They do want to see the club going in the right direction, but more importantly, they feel as though they should be back at the top of the table, and you have to produce the results that get you there.
What have you made of everything since Ange came in, Alison? Do you see signs of progress? Are you optimistic? Are you confident that they can mount a serious league challenge?
I think the early evidence would suggest that they're capable of challenging Rangers for the title. I do think you have to give Rangers credit. I think it's an old cliche, and it's a cliche because there's an element of truth in it, but the real ability of champions is to grind out results when you're not playing well, and Rangers went into that game on Sunday on the back of some iffy domestic performances. I think you would have to credit them for the mentality that they've built in terms of fostering a winning culture and a winning mentality, and it's up to Celtic now to reproduce that. They had a long period of dominance, of unprecedented domestic dominance, and I think now it's about returning to those levels of consistency and challenging for the title. I'm not sure that the 25 points between the teams last season was truly reflective of both squads. I think Celtic unravelled entirely post-January and post that Christmas game at Ibrox. I'm not sure that there really is that level between the teams in terms of quality. But what you have to say is that Celtic have to go and produce now the results and find the performances that take them back there and take them to challenge. But to answer your question, I don't think there's much between them at all.
They can fight on two fronts, I believe. I think they can make a fist of it in the Europa League group as well. I look at that group and I thought, at home they can be quite formidable and there's not a lot to fear. And as you say, it was fine margins at Ibrox that lost the game. A draw probably might have been a fairer result. But I think if you extract the positives from that, and Celtic have added to their squad, they will get better moving forward. So there's every chance that they will go stride for stride with Rangers and also make a fist of it in the Europa League.
I think Europa League just adds another layer to your season. I think everyone enjoys European competition. I don't think anyone would kid themselves on. I think the Champions League is the environment that really just sends a rocket around the club and just adds something completely different to your campaign. But Europa League football and continental opposition always adds an element of excitement, I think, and an element of optimism. I think you'd want to get off to a good start, want to get off to a solid footing. In terms of the depth within the squad of being able to cope on two fronts, I think at points you have to be lucky too. I think if you do lose key players through injury and misfortune, and I think Celtic missed James Forrest terribly last season, I think it can have a significant dent on things.
Well, onwards and upwards. This has been the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if Celtic have strengthened enough, Alison, in the weeks to come. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.